Right, okay. So here we are. It's a Thursday night and it's testimony time. And tonight I'm joined by the one and only Ellie Cousins. And so it's really great that you've made the time to come and join us. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're more than welcome. And I think what we'll do is we'll follow our normal pattern, just get to know a little bit more about you, and then we'll have a song, and then we'll come back and find out a bit more about how you've developed and where God has fitted into that somewhere. So that's really good. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and all that kind of stuff. So I don't even know. I think it's Surrey. I've got a feeling you grew up in Surrey, but beyond that, I can't remember. So tell us where you were growing up and all that.
Yeah, so I'm Ellie, I'm 27, and I did indeed grow up in Surrey in a village called Claygate. It's kind of just on the edge of Greater London, and I lived there my whole life until I kind of moved away at uni time. So yeah, born there, 2 different houses, but grew up there with my parents and one older sister. And I didn't kind of move to Hampshire until university. I went to Winchester University in 2012, and then after graduating and kind of stuck around the area. And now I live in Fareham, but attend Waltham Chase Methodist Church.
Wow. Okay, so that's really interesting. So like a lot of our, I guess, young people, young adults, or not even so many young adults anymore, have a similar experience growing up in a small place and then moving away. So tell us more about Claygate then. What's the lowdown on Claygate?
Oh, it's brilliant. You have to visit one day. It is, I say it's a village, but I feel like it's actually probably more of a town, especially if you're comparing it to some of the small villages around Waltham Chase. But it's brilliant. It's, real community feel. I was quite heavily involved in the church growing up. Holy Trinity Claygate has always been a kind of big part of that community. They do a lot of outreach and stuff. And yeah, it's brilliant. We have a village fete every year, the Claygate Flower Show, which as a child I always took part in the various activities. My mum still does. Now she has an allotment growing vegetables and things. So in some ways it is a very classic English village. But I always felt, particularly as I was a teenager, we were a little bit more cool because we were right on the edge of London. You could get to Waterloo in half an hour and things like that. So.
Wow. Okay. All right. I've just mentally, I think, put 2 and 2 together. So that was where Pedro went, wasn't it? Claygate.
Yes, it was.
Ah, okay. And it's actually quite a thriving church, because I think I've heard about it in other places, in other webinars I've been on.
Yeah, I think probably most recently you might have heard of the Hope Line. All through lockdown, Claygate has got a kind of really great seniors ministry, and they've helped set up this phone line, particularly for those who kind of weren't able to access online services and things. So yeah, it's a great church. And yeah, I think I recommended the ministry program to Pedro before he went there.
Ah, okay.
Something similar. Before I went to uni, I worked with the church for a year.
Okay. Yes, I was going to come back to that in a sec, actually, because I've done a bit of mental maths as well. So, all right. So, apart from the church and to go to school, what other thing did you do? Anything else? Were you involved in any other clubs, societies, whatever?
Yeah, probably quite a lot, actually. I seem to always be having various clubs on different nights throughout my childhood. I did a lot of dance with my sister. We did trampolining lessons. I was quite heavily involved in rainbows, brownies and guides growing up. Kind of did that whole set. But then, yeah, I think it was probably mainly the church where we had a youth group and things as well going to. But yeah, I was always quite happy to get involved with things through school, primary and secondary school. I did netball club and various after school activities. So kept
cool.
Busy. Sure.
Excellent. Yeah. So that's good. Somehow I think I'd worked out that probably was going to be what you were saying, but I just... So, netball then. So what position did you used to play at netball?
I did like a bit.
You may still play. Actually, that was a bit cheeky to assume you stopped, but...
I have indeed stopped. I haven't really played properly since secondary school, but I did always like a bit of shooting. So goal attack was my preferred position.
Now, well, maybe my Julie, she plays a bit of netball on a Monday night. So, and she plays defence. So perhaps you and Julie could have a one-on-one session, you shooting, Julie defending. So that might be, we could do that as a sponsored activity or something. So, so the church obviously had a big impact on you all the way through. Was that your whole family? Did you all go, or was that a solo activity?
It was a bit of a mix. So my mum, I would say, is the one that kind of brought us up going to church. She's been a Christian for many years, but it was not so much my dad's faith. He wasn't anti it or anything, and he would occasionally come along with us if there was like a family all-age service. But no, it was definitely much more kind of my mum's faith, and she was the one that kind of took me and my sister along from when we were children. The faith that my mum had, I think, definitely became mine, and I always kind of remember it was never forced upon us. I know if we had a sleepover on a Saturday night, we didn't have to go to church Sunday morning, but it was actually something that I always quite enjoyed. They had a very good kind of children's church scheme, and then as I got older, a really thriving youth group as well. So I was very happy to kind of be involved with that and wanting to find out more. I do have to say that actually, even though that's how it started, my dad now actually works for the church. So somewhere along the line, something changed. I think my mum and God were at work over the 30 plus years that they've been together now. And 2 Alpha courses later, my dad now works for the church. So,
what does he do?
He's the caretaker or kind of estates facilities manager. It's a very big church, and they have actually a couple of extra buildings that he helps kind of run and manage as well.
I do remember Hick because he helped at the 150th. Didn't he make the stocks? Did he make the stocks? Is that right?
He did indeed. He's a very handy man. He before joining the church, he was a metal fabricator. So he built things out of metal. Lots of, I think my bunk bed growing up, my dad made. We had quad bikes that he made and things like that. So very handy guy, which is why I think the church appreciate him a lot.
Yeah.
Especially.
Very good. No, that's very interesting. So, and your mum, did she work when you were a child or anything like that?
Yeah, my mum worked in the medical field mostly. So she was a radiographer, and then she went into teaching and lecturing at universities, particularly in kind of mammography and that field. But she was very lucky that she only had to work term time. So she was always able to have kind of half terms off when we were off the school as well and things like that. Oh,
very good. And your sister, where does she fit within this picture, apart from being the older one? So you probably found her lovely and never annoying.
We get on pretty well, actually. I think there was a kind of slight era of conflict when she was just hitting that teenage years and I was still the annoying younger sister. Not cool enough to hang out with her, but we get on really well. She has kind of stayed in the area. Her and her husband live about 20 minutes away from my parents in Surrey, and they just have had a baby girl this year. So I've got a niece now as well as part of the family.
Very exciting. So first Christmas, or maybe not, who knows, with the bubble of 3, that must be yet another thing to try and work out. So yeah. And schooling then, because you I know worked in a school environment for a while. So let's talk a bit about how you ended up doing that.
Yeah, so I always quite liked school. I never really had any issues. I always enjoyed school. So I went to the local village primary school, Claygate Primary, and then to Esher Secondary, Esher High, which is kind of the next town over. That only went up to year 11. So then I went to the local sixth form college, which was a big, 2,000 pupils sixth form college in Esher again. And yeah, it was kind of, I guess, around that time when they start asking you about what are you going to do next, that I decided I wanted to become a teacher. I don't really remember when I decided that. My mum seems to suggest that I've always said that because our vicar growing up, his wife was a teacher. And apparently I like the idea of being a vicar's wife, and if our vicar's wife was a teacher, maybe I should do that too. But yeah, at some point I decided I wanted to be a teacher. I couldn't pick a subject because I quite liked all the different subjects. I was never that focused. So even for my A-levels, I was doing maths as well as English, as well as art and drama. So I kind of liked both sides of the spectrum, as it were. So then I decided I better teach primary school because you get to teach all the subjects. You don't have to specialise on just one. So yeah, I applied to go to Winchester University to do their primary education with qualified teacher status degree. But I didn't go straight away. I wanted to take a year out first, a gap year, which, if anyone of that time remembers, 2011, when my cohort were all finishing college, was the year that the fees changed for university.
Oh, yeah.
So if I went in 2011, I would have paid the £3,000-ish a year. But I wanted to take a gap year. So I was in the next cohort starting in 2012, where it was up to £9,000 a year. So, yeah, much to everyone's surprise and perhaps frustration, I decided to take a gap year anyway and did not go to uni straight away.
So, and that gap year, was that then what you were talking about? That was the year with Claygate, the church. So what sort of things did you get involved in on your gap year?
So initially I had great plans for it to be the classic gap year, lots of travelling, probably wanted to do something good, some charity work. I had great visions of, going to hold baby monkeys in the Amazon rainforest or something. But then my youth worker at the time said, but we do have a gap year programme here at the church, ministry assistant it was called at the time. Would you consider that? And at the time I said, absolutely not. I've lived in this village my whole life. I want to spread my wings. My sister had done the same thing for her gap year 2 years previous. And as a younger sibling, I was adamant to not copy her in everything. So yeah, I didn't want to stay in Claygate at all initially. My youth worker at the time, a lovely man called Drew, kind of just chatted what it would be, talked me through it. And I ended up, kind of interviewing for the position and being offered the job. And actually, I'm really glad that happened because it was amazing. It was kind of one of the best years of my life. It set me up very well, I think, for going to university. So as I say, I was a ministry assistant for the church, which meant I kind of had a role helping in all areas, from the creche to the seniors ministry, which was quite a big thing or starting to grow at the church at that time. But I was mainly involved with Drew as a youth worker. So we did lots of outreach to the local secondary school. We did kind of Sunday night and midweek youth groups. But then I was also able to help out with a few mission trips, short-term mission trips that the church were involved with, which I was pleased with, having kind of wanted a bit of travel to be involved in my gap year as well. So we actually took a group of young people on the church-wide mission to Ukraine. This is something our church has kind of had links with a few villages out there. And so we kind of took a youth group as part of that, as well as with the kind of medical team that went out and the community team, did some youth work. Our associate vicar, or whatever his title was at the time, also had links with a mission in India. So I was able to join them. Actually had my 19th birthday in India, kind of we travelled back that day, which was quite fun.
Cool.
And yeah, there was just kind of lots of different things to get involved with. And also the church at the time had a big kind of 18 to 30s group. We called it our 20s group, which, considering as an 18-year-old who was one of the few people taking a gap year that time, most of my friends, maybe sensibly, went off to university. That was a real blessing to me because I didn't have lots of my school friends around, but I made some really good friends through this 20s group and kind of getting to know them. We were cooking meals together to meet once a week. So I learned to cook before I went to uni as well, which was good. And yeah, it was a really fruitful year. There was kind of training involved. We went away to lots of weekends as part of this ministry program, as well as kind of just serving the church.
Fantastic. Yeah, just as a cautionary tale to young people, always be careful about speaking to youth workers. Although the new one I understand is much better than the old one, so that's all right. So you'll be all right. So yeah, very interesting about just what you kind of. It's interesting then the fall, not, from what you're saying, almost falling into teaching because of some general feeling, but this gap year as well. So not necessarily being a pre-planned thing, but wanting to spend some time, but how God uses that. So maybe we'll come back in a bit to that. And then obviously, how was university then? Because I sense that one or two life decisions may have been made at university. So talk us through that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I loved university. So I went to Winchester, as I said, joined the primary education course, which is one of the biggest ones at Winchester, I think, because it was a teaching college initially. So big cohort, but it was really good. I met lots of people through the Christian Union, which I got quite involved with. And I think the big life decisions you might be referring to is that I
couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, so that was good. In my first year, probably just a couple of months in, I met someone from the CU called Jordan, who we started dating in my first year. And I think it was then in my third year, he asked me to marry him. And I did a 4-year course, so my fourth and final year, as well as kind of doing my final teaching placements, as well as helping run the CU, I was wedding planning. And then we got married literally a month after I finished. So I finished uni in the May 2016, got married in June 2016, and started my first teaching job in September 2016.
Wow, 2016, quite a big year then for you. But yeah, that's really exciting. And I guess it's been a bit of an interesting year, I get, for a lot of people, having a couple of students I know pretty well, and kind of getting out, meeting people at Christian Unions has been a bit more tricky this year. But it sounds like you had a great first year, or all 4 years. So yeah, so you started teaching in 2016, but you're not teaching so much now. So maybe talk us through, if you don't mind, unless this overlaps, it may overlap with the next question, but how did you end up moving out of teaching?
So yeah, I was teaching for about 3 years, all at the same school, Swanmore Primary, just kind of down the road. And I loved teaching, but I found it very challenging as well. Not so much the children, they're amazing, but just the workload. It's a big pressure, which I think if you know any teachers, you probably can understand. And it was getting me down quite a bit. I found that I was tired an awful lot of the time. It wasn't really helping my marriage relationship. So Jordan, being a youth worker, was out quite a lot of evenings. And there were times where we were literally kind of crossing paths because I was staying till 6 p.m, 7 p.m. even sometimes, trying to get all of the marking and planning and everything that teachers do done, that we were barely kind of seeing each other. The half-term holidays, even though they were lovely, I was literally kind of dragging myself to there so that I could just have a week of doing nothing and relax. So it wasn't really even kind of worth it for the holidays, as it were. So yeah, I would say after kind of my second, third year teaching, I started to look for other options, really. That was a bit scary because I'd been planning to go into teaching for quite a while. I'd just done 4 years at uni, prepping me to be a teacher. So the thought of actually leaving that profession was pretty daunting. So I actually spent about a year kind of considering it and praying about it and looking for other jobs, until this opportunity came up with Southampton City Mission. So they are a Christian charity. They are probably most known for running the Basics Banks in Southampton. So we have kind of 5 different venues where we offer food and clothing to those most in need. But they also have a schools team, and they were already coming into my school. I was RE lead at Swanmore, and chatting to Matt, the guy who was the schools worker, he just happened to mention in passing that, oh yeah, we're looking to get another schools worker. We're, going into so many schools now, we need to get another me. And I don't think he had any idea that I'd already been looking and applying to kind of other jobs outside of school. So I then kind of emailed him that night asking, could you tell me more about this? And turns out, yeah, applications were due in by the end of that week, but I applied and interviewed and got the job. That was actually in kind of the summer term, about May of 2019. And kind of, even though I think they wanted someone to start in September, the way school terms work and handing in your notice, you kind of have to give a whole term. So I then actually said, yes, please, but can I start in January so that I could do kind of one final full term. So then, yeah, I had my kind of last class from September to December last year, 2019, and joined the team at City Mission in January. And have, yeah, so for nearly a year now, been working as a schools worker for the charity. We get to go into schools when there's not a pandemic on normally, where we teach their RV lessons, any Christianity topics. We go in and share fun activities. We do a whole day with a year group. We then have always a time of question and answer where these children can ask us, as you know, real life Christians, any questions they want to know. And it's brilliant. And I just love that I'm kind of still going into schools, still working with children, which I love, still using my training, but in a kind of much less stressful environment that just works a lot better for me, for my kind of work-life balance.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, and maybe we'll tease out a bit more about that planning, how that, you know, that timing thing worked afterwards. But I wonder, you mentioned the pandemic, so obviously that's been a major impact on all of our lives, but obviously you'd only started work then in the January, so within the first few weeks really we were all in lockdown, and that must have been quite an interesting period, I would imagine, for you working that all out. So how would you, any lessons you've learned about yourself or whatever through the pandemic?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time. I did about 3 months, so kind of January to March, of actually going into schools, doing the job that I'd been given, until, yeah, lockdown happened. And obviously schools, well, for a while they weren't even open. And even then when some were, it was a case of no visitors allowed. So yeah, our role definitely changed. There was a kind of moment of wondering whether I would get furloughed, whether this job was even possible. But actually Matt, my boss, and I, yeah, kind of really took on the challenge, and we went online. So we have been, still to this day, even though we're back in schools, producing a lot of online content. We do assemblies that go out on YouTube, and we create online packs so that schools can still have the resources that we would do if we were visiting, but they can kind of lead their class through it instead. And it's been a lot of learning new skills, I think. So this time last year, I would not have thought that I would have done so much video editing and kind of creating that content, but that's been fun to try and work with that, and learning how to use Google Classroom and various video editing software. But it's been a really good opportunity, actually. I think, if anything, it kind of came at a good time, because I wasn't so set in my ways in this new job that things being thrown up in the air, was just kind of still learning the new role. And it has given me a good opportunity to try out new things. So as well as kind of all the video stuff, I've been actually doing a lot of digital drawings. I really like art, and kind of my colleagues have learnt that and have worked with that. And so I've been designing logos for us and little images to go on our Christmas thank you cards and things like that. So yeah, it's not always been easy. I think working from home has its challenges, probably more so for my husband, who is used to working alone, and now I'm around all the time, so I love it. But I think it took a bit of getting used to for the both of us. But yeah, it's been okay. It's been, yeah, just kind of learning what the new norm is and learning some new skills along the way, which is always a good thing.
Yes, I listened to a bit on the radio this afternoon about couples in lockdown and working from home and all of that kind of stuff. So I think you aren't alone in having to work out new boundaries or patterns.
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. And heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. Joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ, while fields and floods, rocks, hills and plains repeat the sound in joy, repeat the sound in joy, repeat, repeat the sound in joy. He rose the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders, wonders of his love. And wonders, wonders of his love.
So welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. I think Jordan didn't really know who Martin Smith was at the beginning of this. He's too young for Delirious, whereas some of us are too old for Delirious. But anyway, so I think that was great. So we're going to spend a little bit of time just exploring the hashtag God is with us that features in some of our lovely artwork up at church. So I wonder if you can, you've told us lots of great stories about growing up and how one thing and another thing sort of led you to both teaching and then Winchester and then or Claygate, the gap year thing even before that. So I wonder if you can think of an example or two of where you felt God really, in there with you in that scenarios.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I've realised the most is that hindsight is a beautiful thing. And I think some of these other testimony times have talked about that, where you don't always notice God with you until you look back and reflect and see, of course, he was there all along. And I would say that that is definitely the case for the last 3-5 years, maybe, particularly with kind of finishing university and getting to where I am now. I can just see so clearly God putting things in place to make the journey what it's meant to be. Probably goes back as far as even getting my teaching job. So bear with me, this might be a long journey.
No, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's good.
All the way along. So when I was kind of coming to the end of uni, about to get married, we were looking for a place to live and a job. And we knew it was all kind of going to be roughly in this area. We wanted to stay near-ish Winchester. So we found a flat to live in Chandler's Ford, and I found this job in Swanmore, which I'd never really heard of before. I'd been kind of looking at lots of websites, lots of different jobs, and I just really liked the look of this school. And in the end, it was the only one I applied to, just because it suited everything I wanted from a teaching job. And fortunately, I got offered the job, so that was a great start. And I spent a kind of year or two teaching at Swanmore Primary, commuting from Chandler's Ford, which was great. And a few years into that is when we kind of first heard about Waltham Chase. I knew of the village, but I didn't know of the church at all, just because I was kind of hearing some colleagues that lived nearby. But I like to think that if I hadn't got this job at Swanmore, Jordan would never have got his job as youth worker for Waltham Chase. I mean, really, it's all God, but I like to think that, I was there. And that's because we were visiting my in-laws, so Jordan's parents, for their wedding anniversary a few years ago. They're having a big party for their 25th wedding anniversary. And that is when I met my father-in-law's cousin for the first time. His name is David Moss, and I'm sure lots of people know he was our minister in the circuit. But I'd never met them before. This is, my husband's first cousin once removed. We just met at this family gathering. And I just got chatting to him, and I explained how I was a teacher at Swanmore Primary. And he goes, "Oh, Swanmore. One of my churches is in Swanmore." And that's kind of how the conversation began. And we just got chatting to David and his wife, Ellie, and they invited us round for dinner a few weeks later. And hadn't really thought much of it. It was just lovely to kind of get to know this extended family. But it was at that dinner that David was chatting with Jordan, and he happened to mention that his youth worker had just changed roles, and he was left without a youth worker. And now Jordan...
How frustrating.
I know. So Jordan had kind of always shown an interest in working in a church. He'd done a lot of youth roles kind of voluntarily, but kind of would love to have made it his actual professional job. So I know his ears kind of picked up when he heard David mention they were on the lookout for a youth worker. And that is when that ball kind of got rolling, and we ended up actually, moving churches to join Waltham Chase family. So I always like to think that that's a kind of good first step, that if God hadn't kind of made me apply to Swanmore, would we have struck up that conversation with the Mosses to then lead where we are today? But actually it kind of doesn't end there, because as we've talked about, I don't teach at Swanmore anymore. I kind of left that job, and although I mentioned I was kind of looking for a while, I don't think I've said yet how much I was struggling. So there was actually kind of quite a dark time for me where I knew I wanted to get out of teaching. I was finding it extremely stressful. And to be honest, I think it was affecting my mental health a bit, which had never really been an issue for me in the past. To the point where I wasn't even really wanting to go to church on a Sunday because I was so tired and kind of so fed up. And I was just, wanted something to change. I was kind of actively seeking. I'd even looked into some other jobs. I'd even applied to some other jobs. And I remember particularly there was this one job which I'd applied for. It sounded perfect. It was still working with children. It was kind of where people would go on school trips. So I'd still have that link with schools. The salary wasn't going to be a massive pay cut, which some of the ones I was looking at were. And I thought I found the solution to kind of all my problems. And I didn't even get invited to interview. So that door was kind of shut in my face quite quickly. And I remember kind of being a bit annoyed at God about that. I'd found the solution. Why had he closed that door? And so I kind of stuck at school for another few months, thinking obviously meant to be here still. And it wasn't until about 6 months after I'd applied for that job that I found out about the opportunity with Southampton City Mission, which kind of, again, looking back with hindsight now, that other job would have been okay, but it would not have been anywhere near as much of a blessing as I find my job currently. I then kind of had this opportunity where I'm not only just working with children still, but I'm working in a job where I get to share my faith. And I'm still going into schools more than I would have done in the other job, because that was where schools came to you. And I even get to go back into Swanmore Primary because they've already got the link with Southampton City Mission. So it's just amazing to kind of think, in my plans, in my mind, I had it all sorted and God just wasn't listening and following along. But actually now I can kind of look back and see how he was there at every step of the way. It's just a real encouragement. Even to the point where at Swanmore, they asked me to be RE lead, which wasn't something I was that interested in. I'd done a kind of art specialism whilst I was at uni and wanted to do art subject lead, but they asked me to be RE, so I thought, okay, go with that. I'm a Christian, so they've just picked me because of that reason. But actually, I really then got kind of invested in teaching RE. I like teaching that subject, and I'd learned a lot about the RE curriculum that we teach in Hampshire, to the point where on the job interview, on the job spec for Southampton City Mission, they said things like, do you have a good knowledge of the Hampshire RE syllabus? And this job description, I was just kind of able to read through and say, yeah, that's me. That is describing me right there from everything that I've kind of had go before, just meant to be. And so for me, God is with us in the whole thing, like the whole big picture. He's there every step of the way. I was reminded of that just the other week when I was watching Grace's testimony time. What a great example of kind of God being through someone's whole life. And I think for me, that is just so true. And you don't always notice it at the time, but being able to look back and reflect, I can definitely see God being at kind of different steps, taking me where I am now.
Yeah, and I think that, and you know, you're young enough still that you've got plenty more steps to take, but there is a lot of wisdom in that understanding that. I think before we started rolling the interview, we talked about hindsight, and that learning those skills is we don't always see it in the middle of a trouble. So like when you were saying with the struggle at the school and with your own mental well-being and all that kind of stuff, you can't always, if we're honest, we can't always rejoice in those moments. But it's something about hanging on and then realizing later, coming back and going, oh yes, you were and you are and you will be with me, God. That's really helpful. So yeah, I that was really encouraging. Is there any other have you got any other stories like that, or if we I mean, I'm sure there must be other times. Is there anything else you would like to share with us? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I don't know, that's one of my big main ones
Mm.
on my heart at the moment. But I think, yeah, just knowing God is with us, for me at least, in the way that I experience that, it's always through a sense of peace. I kind of grew up hearing about these other amazing testimonies. I think having kind of grown up a Christian, I was almost a little bit jealous of those people that came to faith later in life, who had a big kind of blinding light moment, and it's always just seems more dramatic and exciting. And even now, I'm really glad that I was, you know, taken to church by my mum, because if she hadn't told me about Jesus, I don't know who else might have done. But there are still moments when you kind of think, but is my testimony just a bit boring? Is it just a bit, you know, manila? And I think kind of going along to various kind of Christian conferences, you know, helping with the youth when we took them to Soul Survivor, you get to witness and experience a lot of those amazing, kind of crazy God encounters where people are in fits of joy and hysterics, or kind of major bursting out loud, overwhelming emotions. And that's never really happened for me, which I know kind of particularly as a teenager, questioning my faith was always a bit disappointing, and does that not make it real? But I think I've kind of come to realize that actually for me, God is most at work when I sense peace, kind of peace that you couldn't explain in any other circumstance. When I am going through times where I feel sad or stressed or even just overwhelmed because there's a lot going on and there's busyness, God gives me peace. And it is this real sense, kind of internal, things are okay, there's no need to worry. To the point where, as you said, I'm still reasonably young. I've got hopefully a long journey ahead of me. And I feel very blessed that I've never had any kind of major tragedies or kind of scary life events. You know, I pray that I won't ever have to face that. But I think I'm at the place now where, should that happen, I trust God enough to know that He's in control. He can bring me that peace if I ever have to face something that would otherwise be lonely or scary.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful, because sometimes when we talked about where God is, it's really helpful to kind of visualize or explain how that feels, or how you've experienced that. And so, yeah, I think that's, I've had a number of conversations with the young people who have said, yeah, but I just grew up in church. My testimony's just really boring. I've not been a drug addict or a bank robber or a combination of the two or whatever, and therefore God can't use my testimony. Well, I think people watching tonight will say, yes, you can use your testimony in mighty ways, and in your role, is like you're saying, going into these schools, you're using all the training, both from the church as your child growing up, but also then for your university and then your teaching career, to kind of that you're in a very nice sweet spot on a Venn diagram where all of that is coming together really well. My brain seems to love Venn diagrams. I don't know what it says about me. So yeah, yeah, and just that sense of peace as a good guide is probably really helpful for people. Yeah, there's a passage that talks about God not being in the earthquake, the fire, but actually in the still small voice. And I tend to think the still small voice is a voice of peace and reassurance, as it were. So yeah, thank you for sharing that and spending some time with us today. And I'm sure once we're able to meet back regularly in a more normal way at church, people will want to ask you more questions, find out even more about you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope it helped someone.
Yeah, and if it has and you'd like to find out some more, then please do email. If you email help@chasemethodist.org, and somebody will come back to you, and we can, if you want to get hold of Ellie, that way we can link up and whatever. So that'll be really good. So yeah, thanks for watching this part.